Well, hello and welcome to this week's The Photographic Life and the return of Seesaw with Fiona Hayes, our monthly review of the photographic exhibitions that you can go and see, or maybe photographers that you can check out online. Anyway, that's enough of the introduction. If you want to know about Fiona, all the information's in the show notes. Let's get to the conversation. Well, Fee, welcome back to The Photographic Life after quite a long summer break.
Thank you, Grant. Very, very nice to be back. It does feel like it's been a long time since the summer break as well, to be honest.
Well, it has, isn't it? But the autumn is the time for exhibitions. But is there anything we missed over the summer that we should note?
I have to say, I don't think it's not been a massively exciting summer, in my humble opinion, for photography exhibitions in particular. A couple of things that have been on. I'm sure that lots of your listeners will have gone to the Dennis Morris exhibition at the Photographers Gallery. That retrospective, that was terrific. That really was very, very good. Very big. Covered his long career as a music photographer. Fascinating to see how he basically started as a small boy, almost as a professional, and he started photographing, Bob Marley, following Bob Marley and the Wailers on tour when he was 13 years old or something. So that was a great one. And where else? I went to Paris at the beginning of October, and this is a little bit frustrating because a lot of the galleries seem to be moving or closing or moving location, like the Fondation Cartier, which is usually a good place for exhibitions. It's moving from Montmartre to Rue de Rivoli. So they were closed. Maison Européenne de la Photographie was closed. Jeu de Paume didn't have anything on. But nonetheless, Robert Doisneau, big Robert Doisneau retrospective at the Musée Mayol, which is worth having a look at the website just to get some just to have a look at it. It's closed just this week. Actually maybe even no, I think it closed last week.
He's
But
funny though, isn't he, Duano? Because he's a photographer that back in the 80s, because there were a lot of books of his work that were suddenly being published, everybody knew of Duano, but he's very much been forgotten here anyway.
well, I'll tell you what, he's not been forgotten in Paris.
No,
Uh,
definitely not.
the exhibition had 450 prints. It was huge in comparatively small space. But he did shoot something like 250,000 pictures in his life.
I
So
think
that
one,
was that
I
was
think
big.
yeah, but I think he's one of those photographers that's kind of been condemned by one photograph. The kiss. Everybody thinks that's Duano, but there's so much more to his work than that.
Exactly. I mean, his career was very long career, and he did a lot of. He started by working for Renault and he took photographs of the factories and things. He shot everything. He shot the streets of Paris that he's obviously very well known for. But there's so many images in this exhibition that certainly I hadn't seen before. I've seen obviously tons of them, but lots more that I hadn't. And he just came across as very much a photographer who would have been must have been an interesting person. One of those people who you actually would quite like to sit down and have a chat and a coffee or a drink with and talk to them about their work because all human life is there.
Yeah, I think I used to have a copy of. He did a book of the Renault work, and it had a red metal cover to it, which has long since left my library. But I think he's one of those photographers because his work appeared in newspapers and in weekly magazines that he maybe didn't get the kind of curatorial recognition that he perhaps deserved.
Yeah, very, very possibly. And the reason it was taking place in the Mayol Museum in Paris was because at one point there were sculptures by Mayol being installed in the Tuileries, I think it was, and Matisse took photographs of the installation and so on. Sorry, Matisse. Uh, do I know? Took
I'm going to say, what
everyone's
was
names
Matisse doing
today.
there? He'd have done a collage of it.
But because he was documenting the installation of the sculptures, there's that link. But honestly, you go around and there's just so much that he did. He shot everything and everyone. And I suspect he is perhaps due for a revival. It would be the kind of exhibition that you could see very easily traveling and doing very well in lots of places. So I think it's worth watching out for that one.
I think the French are very good, aren't they, at kind of having their heroes. I always think sort of Douaneau, Jean-Luc Sieff, Serge Gainsbourg, there's a kind of a history there.
Yeah.
And they're very good at promoting those people, but they tend to just exist within France or within Paris even.
Well, they also are very revered because I went to the exhibition thinking, oh, I can an hour. I'm meeting a friend afterwards, and it was absolutely jammed with French people, not with tourists. On a sort of Thursday afternoon or something, Wednesday afternoon, it was absolutely packed midweek, mid-afternoon, with people going to see the exhibition, which is a good sign. But
Well,
I ended
I
up
think we're
taking
going
a
to
lot
talk a
longer.
little. Well, I think we need to talk about audiences because we've had a brief chat before about this. So,
We have. So Duano was really something, and I think it's one to look out for. I suspect it might be coming. And then the other one I saw in Paris was at the Fondation Henri Cartier-Bresson, was the Avedon in the American West book. Um, they were holding an exhibition of all the prints, all 110 prints, which apparently have not been shown together in Europe before. So this was great. Really interesting to see them also because they had a lot of the marked up prints with Avedon's retouching marks on them and so on. Quite a lot of behind the scenes, and they had the Polaroids, which is the most amazing thing because you're looking at these little Polaroids and going, the Polaroid looks a bit like shit. How do you go from this to something that looks like one of the most iconic pieces of photography in the 20th century?
yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Polaroids. Doesn't that take us back?
It definitely does. And the magic, that funny thing, the difference between what you see on a Polaroid and then the amount of thinking and belief you have to bring to the Polaroid process, the amount of vision you have to go. It's not the same thing when you're looking on the back of a photographer's camera or you're looking at the tethered screen or whatever. So again, this was a very interesting exhibition. It was also very well attended in Paris. And I suspect that will travel as well.
That's got to, hasn't it? I mean, that really, if that isn't something that the National Portrait Gallery or someone's picking up, I think that's almost kind of a criminal.
Exactly. So worth watching out for those. But those were the kind of standouts over the last few weeks and months to me. Passe. So coming back to now, there are there's quite a lot going on, as you say, new season. Um, One of the things that's going on that I am not haven't been to yet, but I think it'd be interesting to hear what maybe some of the listeners may have to say about it, is the photo month London, which is on at the moment, which is basically in East London, lots of independent galleries. I'm still hoping to catch some of the events that are on there. But three exhibitions that are on at the moment I wanted to talk about. What would you like me to start with?
Let's start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start.
Okay, all right, that's the beginning.
It's always good to have some Julie Andrews on the podcast.
All right, we're going to start. We're going to start with Lee Miller in that case. We've got to
Well,
start with
how
Lee.
appropriate.
Yeah. Okay, Lee Miller is at Tate Britain. The big retrospective, 250-ish prints at Tate Britain opened a couple of weeks ago. It covers her whole career. It starts with her as a model. It goes through her development, her association with Man Ray. It goes through her time in Paris. Her time, it starts with her time in New York, goes through her time in Paris, goes through the war years, both in London and in traveling around Europe, and particularly in Germany. And it covers everything. It covers her fashion, it covers her reportage, and it covers her famous friends. Because, of course, one of the things about Lee Miller was she had the most A-list friendship group out there. Um, so what can I what can again it's kind of what can I tell you about this? What do
Well,
you think people would like to know?
well, do you know, I think there's a problem for me with this Lee Miller exhibition. I looked at the book recently. I saw that Kate Winslet has written the foreword to the book, and obviously she played Lee Miller in the film Lee. I don't know if you saw that
I
film.
did.
What did you think of the film?
Well, I think I said at the time, I'm not a massive Kate Winslet fan, and I thought it was very Kate Winslet-y, which is a bit unfair because it was Kate Winslet. But to me, it was like I couldn't quite get over the fact that it was Kate Winslet playing Lee Miller.
Hmm.
Um, I sort of felt like maybe if it was an actress who wasn't that actress,
Yeah, I mean,
I,
I get that, and also it's terrible, corny ending, which I just thought was
yeah.
absolutely horrendous,
Mm.
kind of Hollywoody kind of nonsense. But I had previously watched a brilliant American documentary on Lee Miller, which was a very kind of old school academic documentary, very dry, but brilliant in
Mm.
explaining her life. I don't know if we need an exhibition of this work now at that scale for her as a photographer of the most of the images we know so well as the war images, as historical reference. But I just wondered how influential the film and Kate Winslet were in this exhibition coming together.
I'm sure they were somewhat influential, but also I think this exhibition, certainly there have been other big exhibitions of Lee Miller's work, apart from in her own foundation, which is in England.
Yeah, it's
Um,
down in West Sussex.
yeah. Um, the book that I have about her, which I bought last year, is a catalogue from an exhibition that was held in the Netherlands a couple of years ago, which it was called Lee Miller in Print, and it's actually a terrific book because it's a terrific catalogue. It's a big fat catalogue, which is up there somewhere, and I think that it's not just the film. I think there's been a lot about her, and I think to be honest, I think that the Lee Miller Foundation and the Lee Miller Archives are very active, and that's a good thing. You don't want people to be languishing in obscurity. So I think it's a lot of activity on their part that pushing it as well. So the film will have given her profile, given lifted her profile beyond just photography enthusiasts and photography people who know about photography. So I think there's that. Um, and I think also things like when I was going around the exhibition, there's no soundtrack. Um, and you know the way sometimes some exhibitions there's like there are QR codes and you can listen to people talking about the work, which is actually rather helpful a lot of the time, I find. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. But there's none of that in this. So I actually, as I was going around, I was listening to a podcast, a series of podcasts by the Lee Miller Archives, which were readings of Lee Miller and her husband Penrose's love letters to each other. I think it's called Lee Miller and Ronald Penrose.
Roland
Roland,
Penrose, yeah.
yeah. Love Letters in Gold Handcuffs or something. And then they're quite short episodes. Each one it reads is a reading of a letter. And the letters themselves are extremely lovey-ish, especially his to her. But there's a little bit of discussion by various experts and by her granddaughter as part of the podcast, which I actually felt added to the exhibition. But this is the kind of thing that the foundation is doing, again, to kind of like keep her legacy, bring her legacy to new audiences and so on. I
Yeah.
don't think it's a bad thing.
No, I don't think it's a bad thing. And I find myself really torn as somebody who's really interested in history. Um, but I'm not sure it's a photographic exhibition as much as a history lesson.
There's a bit of that. But I think also we've got to keep in mind. our ages and our knowledge of the history situation, and some comments and conversation and discussions with I've been having on social media about it with people, because there are people of our generation who do sort of feel like, is there anything new to see? Haven't we seen everything? And to be honest, we've seen most of what is in this exhibition. But of course, there are plenty of other people who have not, and that's important that other people get a chance to see it. And actually, the thing that really, I don't want to sound patronizing here and say the thing that really rescued it for me, but the thing that really made it work for me was, funnily enough, the curation, the hanging of the exhibition. And you and I have also talked. I have a real thing. We are designers as well, and I have such a thing about how you put things on the wall, and how you get people around the space. And as you and I have spoken regularly, you can kill great work by the way you put it, present it to people, or you can make something that's not so great look absolutely fantastic and tell a different story the same way, right?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So what did they get right?
What they got right is the the number of images is good. It's 250. It's a lot, so it's a lot. But the rooms, it's in quite a few different rooms, and the rooms are carefully controlled. So there's a room about her travels, including her time married to an Egyptian businessman. So there's a bit of desert photography and stuff. There's a room that is purely about the concentration camps. And Eastern and the war, but mostly the concentration camps, where obviously you're not allowed to take photographs, but that's quite a small space, and it doesn't flow into anything else. And then there's a room which includes layouts from magazines, from Vogue, because she worked for Vogue for a very long time. So I felt that it's a simple thing to get right, but it's also a really simple thing to get wrong, and people do get it wrong. But if you don't know a lot about Lee Miller, you can walk around this exhibition and you really get, I think, a very good, clear overview of what she was interested in, how her work developed, and why it's important. And if you feel like you already know everything there is to know about Lee Miller, or a lot of what there is to know about Lee Miller, you can go around and you can kind of go. There are threads like this surrealist thing. So she started in Paris being friend with Man Ray and being friends with surrealists, and she was very linked to the surrealist movement. But the surrealism keeps popping up again and again in little touches throughout her life, and in the fashion, in the portraits. And so it's just somehow you're led very nicely through her work, through her life, through her relationships. There's a nice amount of information and visual information. I mean, pictures of solarization and exploration techniques and so on. So all of that actually just works really, really well. There's just one drawback, which is, oh my God, the crowds again. I mean, I'm loving that. Maybe it's your podcast. Maybe it's your friend, Grant. Maybe we're responsible for everybody going to photography exhibitions all the time. But the only trouble is, because they're original prints. So they're kind of small. Some of them very small. Some of them small. So you're kind of wandering around, and there's a ton of people. So you have to sort of keep. At least I went on a Monday afternoon, and it was very busy. And
Why aren't all these people at work, for goodness sake?
Why? I'm telling you, why the hell are these
What's
people
going on?
No wonder the economy is in the tank.
But what's the age of these people?
Well, my age.
So,
No, I'm telling you, honestly, there's a lot of people from the comments on my social media. A lot of freelancers. A lot of freelance designers and photographers going to
retired and the freelance who haven't been commissioned.
It is. There were a few younger people, but on the other hand, it was a Monday afternoon. If you were a student, you should have been in class.
Right.
I'm hoping that the students will be going to the late nights and so on. And I'm just going to have a little bit more of a rant about this, which is if you are a person of any age and you're going to a photography exhibition, please do not stand in front of one piece of work for 5 minutes reading and looking. If you need to look at it in great depth, have a look around, check if anybody else is queuing to see that piece, and maybe step back and let them see it too. God, people are annoying sometimes.
Well, okay.
Etiquette, exhibition etiquette. We need to talk
Okay,
about that.
that's something we definitely need to talk about then, because yeah, I suppose it depends upon the length of the text and the way in which the exhibition is put out. But it's just really small pieces of text, is it? It's people.
It's not really, really small, but they're small enough. And personally, because I like to read all the text in exhibitions, I bring my phone with me. And if I think that's a really long thing, I'm not going to stand here in people's way for 2 minutes. I'll take a photograph. I step back and read it on my phone.
Oh, you're so modern.
Exhibition etiquette.
You're so modern. Well, what else have you been
Well,
to see?
I like to think the word is thoughtful, but
Yeah,
that too.
thoughtfully modern. What else has dragged you?
Okay. Anyway, I do think. I mean, I'm sure. I don't think we even need to recommend Lee Miller. It's
No,
really.
I
It's
think you're going to go and see it if you're interested in it. And I agree. I think if you were interested or sort of your interest was sparked by the film, I do believe maybe it's the very cynical side of me that this exhibition, I feel they were hoping to get a much bigger attendance due to the film. And therefore, maybe they have, and therefore, maybe it succeeded in that. But I think you either want to go and know about Lee Miller or you don't. It's a tricky one, isn't it?
I can't disagree. I can't argue with that. On the other hand, I do think everyone should know about Lee Miller. If
Yeah,
you're
I agree
interested in
with that
photography,
also. Yeah,
and you might learn something that you don't already know from this. So anyway, Lee Miller, Tate Britain on for the rest of the winter for sure. Okay, something completely different. Joy Gregory at Whitechapel Gallery.
yeah.
The exhibition is called Catching Flies with Honey. What can I tell you about Joy Gregory?
You tell me everything because she's one of those people whose names I know, and I think I know a lot about her, but I kind of think I probably don't.
Yeah, okay. So Joy Gregory, British, Jamaican heritage. She's in her 60s. And she grew up in Aylesbury, Buckinghamshire. I'm just checking notes over here. She's been a teacher. She teaches probably maybe still. She has an honorary fellowship of the Royal Photographic Society. Um, she, I first noticed her work, or I first remember noticing her work at the other photography exhibition at Tate Britain earlier this year, the 80s, Photographing Britain. She was one of the photographers of the 80s whose work sort of stood out at the time. She had a self-portrait series, which are black and white, and they're really close-ups. So like her eyes, her ear, the corner of it, and they were very attention grabbing, and they worked very well. And I remember noticing those. So those images are in this exhibition as well. So it's basically a big retrospective, and this is a very big retrospective. Whereas the Lee Miller has a lot of quite small images, and the space is fine. This has a lot of different images of different sizes, different. There are some video pieces. There's a couple of rooms basically with video pieces. There are installations and there are different forms of photography, and it takes up a lot of space. And it's very empty, which was at least it was very nice and empty when I went there late on a Sunday afternoon. It was nice and relaxing. You can
But
really see the work.
but I think that tells its own tale, doesn't it? Because I do know about Joy Gregory. I was kind of slightly playing with you in the beginning because her work has sort of been there on the periphery for me since the 1980s.
Yeah,
That I've always been aware of it.
yeah.
Invariably kind of council funded or arts council funded or local government funded, that kind of work that was coming through at that time, but wasn't very loud, but you were aware of it.
Exactly. And so to try and describe her work, because the thing is, what's really interesting to me about her work and this exhibition is that she doesn't have one style. She doesn't have one focus. her theme, the overall sort of theme of her life is probably identity and so on. But on the other hand, if you're a photographer, what even when you're not photographing identity. But there are different phases in the work. So there are black and white images. The self-portraits are there. There's a series of images she made when she was traveling that are black and white that show they're about being alone in hotel rooms. There are which is very reductive. That's not really what that sounds silly, but that's the beginning of the story. There are color images she shot in the sort of like 80s and 90s, which she's repurposed to sort of consider, finding your own identity and stuff. Again, kind of reductive. Let me try and say something a bit more meaningful. There are a couple of series. She experiments with techniques. So there is a series of cyanotypes, which which are photographs of accessories, handbags, dolls, underwear, lingerie, and they have this beautiful kind of exotic abstract look. They look a bit like Lillian Bassman for Harper's Bazaar in the 1950s kind of thing. But they're very contemporary. And then she also has was it another type? She has other kinds of technical experimentation where she's just photographing objects, hairdresser's scissors, jewelry, a lot of still life, but exploring the still life technically with different media, and it comes across very beautifully as a sort of a meditation, I suppose, really on what makes me, why am I looking at this? There are pictures of clothes, there are pictures of her wardrobe, and then there are more travel works as well. There's one of her series is about blondes and the definition of blonde, and she gets people wearing blonde wigs and talking about how they feel about being real blonde or the wig or whatever. And she has portraits that she's made in various parts of the world, including the Caribbean. There's historic references. It's it's a lot of different techniques. And each technique is explored in a satisfying kind of way. You go and you think, okay, this makes a lot of sense. I like this body of work. Oh, and now we go on to the next body of work, which has echoes in terms of what she's photographing and what she's thinking about, but taking it from a different angle. So it's worth taking time to go through this exhibition and really following and thinking about what the photographer, the artist, is trying to do and to say. I think the word I just keep coming back with is meditative. It makes you
Yeah.
think.
But I think that I always think of this kind of work, and I think of Sunil Gupta in the similar way,
Hmm.
which, and coming through a similar period and a similar way in which the work was funded to be made. I think a lot of people find this difficult work to connect with or
Yeah.
perhaps to understand. That doesn't make it a bad thing, but I think it does give you an explanation. Whereas Lee Miller is pretty route one and it's packed,
Yeah.
and this one is, well, could
No.
be considered very academic and difficult, and therefore it was quiet.
I think the thing is it's more that again, at the risk of saying mean things about Lee Miller, which I don't want to do, part of the thing with Lee Miller, which you can think is a good thing or a bad thing, is that it's her famous friends and the fashion and the fact that she's model and the photograph in Hitler's bathtub and stuff. She's a personality, she's a celebrity.
There's a lot of hooks there, aren't there?
Exactly, ton of hooks. Whereas with Joy Gregory, it is much more about the work. And I know what you mean about Sunil Gupta. I would say, without kind of going away and thinking about it, or without going away and kind of checking my references, I would think her work is a little more. The word I want to use is clean but clear, or sort of like lucid in a kind of a way. It's kind of like, everything I looked at, I just thought this was interesting. I like it. And I'm not that easy to please. There's some. I liked I think people, if you give yourself time to go and look, you would find it interesting. That's what I would say to the sort of the doubters and the naysayers. She's somebody who explores photography, but she doesn't witter on about it like I'm doing now. She just is very like, here's an idea, here's a project, here's an idea, here's a project. But at the same time, it's very holistic, meditative, all those kind of things.
So it's one of those exhibitions, and go along, you might be challenged, you might not understand it, but you'll probably get something from it.
I think you would definitely get something from it. It's there's a lot of different things as well. So even if you're not so keen on one bit, you're bound to find something else that you would like.
Oh, that sounds good. It's like a box of Quality Street.
Yeah. Yeah, something like that.
Oh, the photographic Quality Street.
Photographic quality and
Yeah.
street.
Okay,
Okay.
go on. What
All
next?
right. Okay. So that is Joy Gregory. And Joy Gregory is on at the Whitechapel Gallery until later this year as well. Actually, maybe until, no, I think it's until next spring. So plenty
Well,
of time to go and see that.
the thing is that a lot of these exhibitions are very expensive to put on,
Yes.
and therefore they're really being given long periods where you can go and see them. Of course,
Yeah.
arguably to the detriment of other work being seen, because once you've been to see that body of work, you might not go back to the Whitechapel, for example, again until the middle or end of next year.
Well, until certainly until, March or April when it's on. Now, I personally will definitely be going back because I found this interesting. This interest is interesting. And there's more I want to explore. Whereas I don't think I'm going to go back to the Lee Miller,
Hmm.
even though I really liked it. Honestly, I'm not going to go back to that, and that's on again until I don't know January or whatever it is.
Okay, right. So we were going to move on to the next excitement.
Okay, so the the next excitement. So the third exhibition, something a little different. Excuse me, Mark Steinmetz, Taken from Light at David Hill Gallery. So
Okay.
totally different
Well,
in,
you know, Mark has contributed to the podcast.
I did not, but I'm not one bit surprised.
Well, he has. I love his work.
Well, you've got to come to this exhibition and it's on until certainly until December. So people regular readers of the column, regular listeners to the podcast will know that I have mentioned the David Hill Gallery, and it's my local, basically in West London here in Ladbroke Grove, lovely little gallery. So, Mark Steinmetz, why don't I have a drink of water? Why don't you tell people a bit about Mark Steinmetz?
Well, I think I don't know what work is being exhibited in this particular body of work, but I do use his work around particularly the summer camp and the kids playing baseball work. I regularly use that as a really great example of how you can build a body of work, a narrative body of work that feels incredibly timeless around children or teenage children, sort of that kind of age group. Because I think that's kind of an area that a lot of people dismiss as photographers as either too difficult to handle or not of any value. So for me, Steinmetz is obviously American, but that work, particularly the summer camp work, I think he has an incredible soulfulness to his work.
Well, in that case, you double definitely have to come to this exhibition. Um,
Okay.
it is he so listeners can go back and listen to him on an earlier edition of the podcast. He's American. He came over. I think he and his wife were over lecturing or teaching in France over the summer or so, and they were here for the exhibition briefly as well. One of the things about his background is that he met Gary Winogrand when he was young and spent time with him, sort of like learning, I suppose, what street photography. What are we calling
Oh,
it?
we
That thing.
that thing.
Learning learning that thing from one
Yeah.
of the masters of that thing.
Yeah. And
Uh,
also, I should say his wife is also an outstanding photographer, and her name escapes me for the moment, but I tried to get her on the podcast as well, and I failed. But she's also
well,
very good.
She's well, maybe try again. But so this exhibition, it's not huge, but it's beautiful. It's beautifully curated, and so yes, there are lots of summer camp pictures. There's one particular shot of a boy on a bicycle overlooking the city. I think it might be I think it's LA, looking out over. There's a lot of kids hanging around. It's not all kids, but a lot of kids hanging around. The light is that sort of like twilighty, early morning because it's black
Kind of
and white.
soft, isn't it? The light is always soft.
It's very soft, and you never quite know what's exactly going on. And I was looking at it was reviewed in the Financial Times magazine when it opened, and that was interesting that Josh Lustig said, what did he say? He said the way he interpreted the picture that they looked at, which is it's early morning, people are fishing, and there's a man holding a fishing rod, and there's a little boy behind him, and the little boy's small of it, his head is just leaning into the small of the man's back. So it's a little boy and his dad. And Josh Lustig said, it looks to me like the boy's head is whirling with ideas or something. And I looked and thought, no, he looks like he's going to sleep. So there's a lot you read into it. And the thing I
Yeah, but
really
beware of people telling you what photographs mean. You know, I have no time for that. I think I'm more than happy for the photographer to tell me.
I don't think he was saying this is what it means. I think it was more the interpretation because this is one of the things about Mark Steinmetz's work is the interpretation. So the thing I really felt looking around it, I don't know if you know what I mean. Stephen King, as in Stephen King novels, not necessarily Stephen King films and stuff, but there's a Stephen King kind of that Americana back in the days when Americana wasn't a bad thing. Um, where anything could be happening.
Really, I don't get that at all.
Oh, there you go. See, okay,
No,
so everyone you got to go and see what you think.
okay. No, I don't. I mean, I don't get that. I always kind of get that sense of foreboding. You know, it's like a kind of an Eggleston thing. There's a sense of foreboding. Whereas with Steinmetz, to me, it's more like if we're going to get literary about it, it's more like Catcher in the Rye.
Oh, no, no, but Stand By Me is also by Stephen King, right?
Yeah, but there's still that kind of, oh, you're dragging me into a world of interpretation I refuse to be dragged into.
All right. Okay. Well, we're inside the interpretation, but there's like this one picture in here, which is a house. It's surrounded by undergrowth or overgrowth vegetation. Basically, you can just about see the house coming out of the leaves. Um, and I was like, gosh, this is so like a set for a Stephen King plot. Anyway, there's storytelling of some kind
Oh, there's
going on.
great. Yeah, absolutely. I can highly recommend his work. There's great storytelling.
Yeah,
He's a very clever photographer.
he is. He's in, and there's a lovely exhibition, and that's on at David Hill Gallery, West London, certainly until for the next couple of months anyway. Well worth a
Okay.
visit,
So
and
that's
it doesn't
three.
cost a fortune like Lee Miller.
No, yes. So that's three exhibitions you've been to see. Was there anything else you wanted to add to that? Because if not, I'd like
Yeah.
to question something around audience. But was there anything else you wanted to recommend before we spend a little bit of time
Not
on that?
at the no, not at the moment. There are things coming up, but there's nothing that I'm going, oh, very excited to see this.
Okay, well
But I
that
was surprised. Your thing, sorry, Grant, just to say,
yeah.
your thing about, putting on a big exhibition that kind of blocks it for the next little while.
Hmm.
It is interesting that some of the big exhibitions that we had last year, like at Saatchi Gallery and things like there aren't. I'm not seeing those at the moment, but maybe they're coming up and I just haven't checked my notes yet.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting that you haven't said Cecil Beaton
Oh, yes, Cecil Beaton, sorry.
because
Next bell.
okay, because I'm intrigued to hear what you think about that because
Yeah.
for me, just a brief thing because you and I have briefly spoken about this kind of in the green room. Um, I'm getting concerned at the moment about photographic exhibitions as to who they're aimed at and whether or not they're actually bringing in new people or whether or not they're just feeling like history lessons or that they're set up for people kind of our age. Because I did speak to somebody recently, just very briefly, but they're teaching photography. They've got a huge amount of people at in the UK A levels, so they're about 18 years of age. They've got 70 odd students in 1 year studying photography. But out of that, only seven are going on to study the medium after
Mhm.
leaving. And they're doing photography because they think it's easy. And then they find it isn't easy, and then they don't want to do it. And I'm just really concerned at the moment. My conversations with those people is they're not going to see Lee Miller and they're not going to see Mark Steinmetz, however much we really love the idea of that. They're not going to see Cecil Beaton unless they're dragged along by their school, and then they don't really understand why they're there, other than to buy a pen in the gift shop. And I I think, as we progress through the coming months, is just to kind of think about that and think, why are these exhibitions being put on? What age are the people who are putting them on and curating them? And who do you see? What's the age group of the people there?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the thing, by the way, one thing that I have a couple of thoughts straight off on this. One is that the newest curator at the Photographers Gallery, Taz Damani, she's in her 20s. So we'll see what Taz.
Yeah, but we've had Dennis Morris and the exhibitions
Yeah,
coming
but she's
up.
only just, but Taz only just started. So let's see what she brings through. But on the other hand, that's just to pick out one name.
Mm,
I think individual curators are kind of, obviously they're at the mercy of we need to make money. Our institutions need to make money. And that is the thing that I keep coming back to, which is that unlike France, which supports photography and many other art forms, the UK doesn't really support the arts, and it certainly doesn't support photography. The British government does not support photography
no,
very well,
no.
if at all.
I agree. I think that that is a part of the problem. But the one thing I'm looking at, and it only occurred to me in the last couple of weeks, was I just did a roundup of the kind of stuff that was on show in London and in New York at the moment. And I'm not talking about private galleries where they're trying to sell the new young hotshot. I'm talking about kind of the bigger galleries and the museums and so forth. I couldn't find a photographer being exhibited under the age of 50, and the majority of them are dead.
Hmm. Yeah, but that could be just now. I mean, the thing is, we have had times in recent memory. I mean, like the one of the little exhibitions that was on in London was Tyler Mitchell. A very small exhibition at Gagosian at the beginning of end of September, which is now a big exhibition in Paris at at MEP. But again, it's a big exhibition in Paris, not a big exhibition in London.
Well, exactly. And I've got to be honest, for me, there is an element, I'm going to make this is perhaps slightly controversial, but what the hell? There's a real case of Emperor's New Clothes with Tyler Mitchell because I'm looking at the work and I don't see anything I haven't seen a million times before in a million and one fashion magazines. It's the truth
Well,
of the matter is we just don't see as many fashion magazines anymore.
I think last year, if you did look carefully, there were lots of it was last year. It was last year, really. There were quite a few exhibitions of younger photographers that were happening at places like Huxley Parlour.
Hmm.
So I'm sure some of those exhibitions will be coming back. I think Jack Davison had an exhibition.
But again, they are the selling galleries. I mean, Huxley Parlour
Yes.
exists
Yeah.
purely to sell.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in terms of, like I say, the Saatchi did have a photography exhibition that I popped into earlier in September. I think it was a I want to say the British Photographic Society exhibition, which was but I won't say that in case I've got it wrong. But it was a group show.
Mm.
But again, it's kind of like, so where is the next big thing? But I do think it comes back to this thing, like if you need to get people through the door in order to have a successful show, and you need a successful show in order to stay in business because you don't get grants or you don't get enough money from anyone to keep you in business. You've got to bring people through the door. Therefore, you have to have crowd pleasers, and crowd pleasers tend to be the Lee Millers and the the Elton John and David Furnish collection.
Yeah,
That's
but
the thing.
yeah, but there again, you see, you know, you're charging big money to get in as well. You know, when I was a kid and you were a kid, you didn't pay to see
Yeah,
exhibitions.
exactly. But
You
that,
just walked in, and that was great. But now, if you're going to say, well, okay, it's £25 a head,
yeah.
then you are looking at an older demographic to come
Uh,
in. So the exhibitions become
Also,
focused to that.
in all honesty, older demographics are more like, I think, older demographics are more likely to have one, if you are over 60, you can get a senior discount. And two,
Well, I
if
wasn't
you
aware
are,
of that. If only I was over 60.
I've heard.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
Plus, there's the art fund. So, you know, I know people who are, I don't have a Tate membership these days. I don't have a V&A membership these days. I used to have both of them, but nowadays I'm a freelancer. I can't actually spring for that. But I do have an art fund membership because it means that you get, you know, some money off exhibitions. But that doesn't really, that applies. There's some galleries it works for, some museums it works for, and some it just doesn't. But even so, I don't think it's necessarily money that would stop a student, a 20-year-old or a 25-year-old from seeing an exhibition. I think it's more information,
Mm.
knowing what to go to. I mean, people aren't just going to, they just aren't going to know. You don't know. If you're 25, you probably don't know who Lee Miller is, if generally speaking.
Well, but
You
this
have
is
to
a
go see
bigger,
exhibition.
yeah, this is a bigger thing because when we were 25, we did. And I think that, you know, there is, I remember my first exhibition I went to see was Jean Tinguely at the Tate and Kirch Sitters in Cork Street, because I knew of them when I was 16, 17, because I would read about them in the Observer or the Times on Sunday. And that's not precociousness. That was
Yeah.
just what you did, or you looked in Time Out each week.
Well, exactly, and also let's face it, there were a few other things to do with our time when we were that age,
Well, you
and
can
there weren't
see.
so many exhibitions generally to go to and stuff. So, I mean, these are just excuses, but I think there has to be an answer. And if the problem is how do you get more people, more young people, more different people to go to exhibitions and therefore make the exhibitions more popular and therefore make more exhibitions happen, all that virtuous circle. How do you do it? I think the only way to do it is really telling people about it, like having podcasts, like having social media, like doing this kind. We got to spread the word.
Wow, you sounded like a professional podcaster there, Phoebe.
I'm learning from the best.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but rounding up the month's discussion beautifully. I think this is something we should continue kind of as a kind of undercurrent in future episodes because I think it's very relevant. And I'm sure our listeners must be having similar kind of thoughts. So do let us know, listeners. Do get in touch with me or Fee. And Fee, you're on Instagram at.
I am just about hanging in there on Instagram. I think everyone's fed up with Instagram, but I'm trying to revive my Instagramming at the moment. I'm at the art dictator because as I keep saying to students, it's like it's there, it's still free. How else are you going to tell people what's going on? What you can do? Pick up a phone, go and have a coffee. Oh, that's an idea. But at the art dictator on Instagram, please comment, join
So
the
comment
conversation
and
with me
yeah,
there.
comment and engage with Fee there. Let us know what you think, especially if you go and see the Lee Miller, because I think that and the Cecil Beaton that are currently on in the UK, and there are a couple of big exhibitions currently on in New York as well of the great sort of icons. Let us know what you think about these exhibitions and shows. Fantastic to have you back, Fee. Look forward to catching up with you again next month.
Thank you very much, Grant. See you then.
That just leaves me to say thank you very much for listening. If you have been to see any exhibitions that we've missed, or you think that we're reviewing them unfairly, then do get in touch with us through the website unitednationsofphotography.com. We love to hear what you think, what you see, and also, I suppose in a sense, if you agree. Anyway, over the coming week, you know what you need to do in these troubled times. Take care.